The lawsuits against Sean Diddy Combs continues to stack up, and it should be no surprise at all who the latest batch is coming from. That, of course, being Texas-based attorney Tony Buzbee. Now, Buzbee made his mission clear back in October that his firm plans to file more than 100 lawsuits against the disgraced mogul. But now he's in a rush to meet a March 1st deadline. Why? Because that's the last day the law in New York allows victims of past sexual assault file civil lawsuits despite the statute of limitations being up. So let's break down the latest allegations. Now, we have to mention these accusers did not use their real names in the court filings. Instead, they are referred to as Jane or John Doe. In John Doe's complaint, he alleges he was drugged and sexually assaulted at an after-party in Los Angeles in 2015. So what happened? According to the complaint, John Doe was a music performer and pursuing a career as a rapper and singer. At the time, he secured an opportunity to perform as an opener for an unnamed popular artist at QC's 2020 in LA. According to the filing, Diddy was there because his record company had interest in the show. Before the performance, John Doe claims an associate of Diddy's told him that if he performed well, they would discuss getting him a deal with Bad Boy Records and arrange studio time between him and Diddy. So John Doe performed his set. He later went to an after party at the same venue, which according to the complaint took place in the back rooms of a club which had breakout rooms. John Doe says a lot of artists and entertainers were there. Drugs were taken, drinks were flowing, but then a switch happened. According to the complaint, an associate of Diddy's handed him a drink that was said to be from Diddy. And after, John Doe became lightheaded. He was slipping in and out of consciousness, and Doe knew something was wrong. After he realized he was drugged, he lost consciousness. But while drifting in and out of consciousness, Doe says he saw Diddy and his entourage engaging in group sexual activity, where allegedly other attendees appeared drugged, unconscious, or as if they were paid escorts. Doe says at one point he regained consciousness after finding Diddy grabbing his crotch while his pants were already removed. He claims Diddy groped him and believed he performed oral sex on him. Now, Doe says he tried to fight off Diddy, but then Diddy's security team stepped in. Now, Diddy allegedly threatened Doe, telling him he could easily get in contact with his manager and ruin any chance he had of succeeding in the industry if he didn't comply. The complaint says Doe was terrified and realized he was outnumbered by Diddy's security, so he pretended to comply for his own safety. Doe claims Diddy then ordered him to have sex with a woman he didn't know while Diddy watched. So Doe says he pretended to agree. He says he made an excuse he needed water and to use the bathroom before having sex. Then Diddy's security team let him go to the bathroom, but instead John Doe snuck out of the venue, went to the parking lot, jumped in his car, and drove off. Now, Doe says because of Diddy's power and notoriety, he didn't immediately report what happened because he didn't want to be blackballed in the industry. Then we have another suit, this one filed on Tuesday by a Jane Doe. Now, she claims Diddy drugged her and forced her to have sex with other people while he watched. This allegedly happened back in the 90s. It's unclear what year. The complaint just states in the 90s. Jane Doe attended a private party in New York City that was being hosted by none other than Diddy, who was likely going by Puff or Puffy at the time. Now, during that party, Jane Doe says she believed there were a lot of gang members at the party, so she felt unsafe and she wanted to leave. But she said Diddy didn't allow her to. Now, Jane Doe claims from here, Diddy made it clear that she would be forced to participate in group sexual activity that was happening at the party, but also that she felt like she was being drugged. Doe claims Diddy forced her to participate in the group sex with not only him, but other people at the party. And this isn't the only alleged sexual assault this Jane Doe is claiming against Diddy. She says another sexual assault happened after a party at a nightclub in the late 90s called Limelight. Again, no specific date was mentioned in this complaint, only alleging that it happened in the late 90s. Now, during this alleged incident, Jane Doe claims she was with several friends. Guests were partying on all 5 floors of the club, but the 2 top floors were occupied by group sex parties. Very 90s, I guess. So Jane Doe says she was dating Diddy's security guard at the time of this party. Doe says she and the security guard got into an argument during the party. Diddy intervened and told her to go to a back room and wait. Then the security guard entered the room and slapped Jane Doe in the face. Now, according to the complaint, she feared for her life, but felt no choice but to stay in the situation. She claims Diddy detained her and her friend until early the next morning, until they were taken to the Trump Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. When they got there, Doe claims that they were taken to the penthouse, put in a room with his security guard, who allegedly physically and sexually assaulted her while Diddy watched. Now, Jane Doe claims she and her friend were then forced to take what she believed was ecstasy, and both women were forced to engage in group sex that she didn't want to participate in. Then after several more hours, Diddy finally let her and her friend leave the hotel. Now, on the same day this Jane Doe filed her complaint, Another Jane Doe filed her own. Now, this Jane Doe claims she was offered $2,000 to serve as a bottle service girl at one of Diddy's parties. Then she was given a laced drink and allegedly raped by Diddy's associate at Diddy's direction. She claims in 1997 she was at a party at Diddy's home in the Hamptons, and a friend of hers told her she could earn money working as a bottle girl at the party. Jane Doe claims she was provided a black dress, was told to wait in a separate room before she could come out to the main party. While she and the others waited, Diddy came into the room and encouraged everyone to drink from the coolers. Jane Doe claims after one drink, she started feeling woozy, slipping in and out of consciousness. But she remembered seeing Diddy's male associates, who she claims sexually assaulted and raped her at Diddy's direction while he was there. Doe says she recalls seeing Diddy naked at one point and witnessed another man sodomizing him. Now, this Jane Doe believes her rape may have been videotaped. She says she reached out to Diddy to delete the video, but he refused. From this complaint, it looks like the two Jane Does I mentioned in this story, their allegations are seemingly connected. This Jane Doe claims another assault happened in the late 90s at the Limelight nightclub. Then she and her friend were taken to the Trump Hotel and allegedly were forced to participate in the group's sex activity. And it's the same scenario as the other Jane Doe. Now, Diddy, through his attorneys, denied these allegations. In a statement, they said, quote, "As we said before, Mr. Combs cannot respond to every new publicity stunt, even in response to claims that are facially ridiculous or demonstrably false. Mr. Combs and his legal team have full confidence in the facts and the integrity of the judicial process. In court, the truth will prevail that Mr. Combs never sexually assaulted or trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor." I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer. Safa, always great to see you. Now, Tony Buzbee's law firm has filed more suits against Diddy. What's your reaction? A lot of these claims are terrible: non-consensual group act, sexual activity, allegations of rape by Diddy's associates at Diddy's direction. Then in the John Doe case, allegations of being drugged and sexually assaulted by Diddy. What's your reaction to this new batch of lawsuits?
These new batch of lawsuits aren't surprise, or they're not a surprise to me. These lawsuits essentially echo what we have heard in the past, the allegations that have been pled in the past, and other lawsuits by other attorneys, including Mr. Busbee himself, which is that Mr. Combs engaged in sexual activity or violent sexual activity towards, Jane or John Doe's or specific individuals, and also that, these individuals may have been drugged. They may have engaged in sexual acts with other people against their will. So this is not a surprise. This is consistent all the way around with the previous lawsuits we've heard about. It also echoes some of the information that we know, or possible facts that we know, will be raised in the federal prosecution. So this is not a surprise at all.
Yeah, and Tony Buzbee said he planned to file about 10 lawsuits in the next week, pretty much before that March 1st deadline, the last day the New York law allows victims to file civil lawsuits despite the expired statute of limitations. So talk to me a little bit about that law, and possibly if that law didn't even exist, would we even be having this conversation right now?
So with respect to that law, it gives people the opportunity to bring about these lawsuits who have previously been sexually assaulted or abused or have allegations of such, and it allows them to recover damages because of those allegations. So it's almost like a safety net or a catch-all for individuals who have had these experiences to be able to come back and litigate or to get some sort of justice in their minds, or judicial justice for these alleged acts that have taken place.
Now, back in October, Tony Buzbee obviously made a lot of headlines when he announced at that press conference that he had more than 100 accusers ready to file their lawsuits against Diddy. And now we're in February. In your opinion, what was the strategy behind dropping a few lawsuits here, a few lawsuits there, instead of just all in one?
I think that over time, people have continued to come forward to say, hey, this was my experience. This is what happened to me, and I'd like to file a suit, or, seek some sort of justice or compensation as a result of what was allegedly done to me. On the other hand, I do think that there are individuals who have also initiated lawsuits that may not be true. They may be frivolous. So it's a little hard to parse between what is real, what is not real. But these are the things that a judge or a jury is ultimately to decide. They are the triers of fact in these cases, and they determine what the facts are as they are laid out in the midst of a trial. And so, it's not a surprise, again, that we have all of these lawsuits. Instead of doing it all in one foul swoop, it may be because, certain people were not prepared to file at that point. Maybe Mr. Busbee was trying to keep some in his back pocket. There really could be a number of reasons as to why that took place.
Yeah, a lot of different reasons, possibly a different strategy we'll never know the answer to. And of course, in this new batch of lawsuits, they are Jane and John Doe accusers. They are not using their real name. Do you see that being an issue in the court later on, as we've seen in other cases that involve Diddy and the anonymous accusers?
I think that ultimately what's going to happen in these cases is they will not remain Jane and John Doe's for the entirety of the case. Maybe one instance, and I don't think there are any child victims or alleged victims in these cases. But at some point, I do expect that their identity will likely be revealed. There is also the possibility that some of these cases may settle out, so we may never know who those individuals are. But as a part of the defense for Mr. Combs in addressing these civil suits, he is going to be aware of who these individuals are. And it's only fair and it's only right because he has to adequately prepare his own defense from these suits.
And of course, we can't talk about Diddy right now without also talking about his federal case. But do you see these lawsuits playing any type of role in the criminal case come May when his trial is set to begin? Can federal prosecutors say to the jury, the defendant is facing 50 or however many civil lawsuits, can they even play a role in this criminal matter as well, too?
Only to an extent, and not exactly. So it's a yes and no question. Are the prosecutors aware of these civil lawsuits? Of course they are. Are they parsing through these civil lawsuits to see what, if anything, that they can use for their prosecution against Mr. Combs, or possibly use at trial, or to further their investigation, to also possibly bring about a superseding indictment, although we've already seen one come about? They will definitely do that, and they definitely can look at that information to determine how they want to use that in their federal case. However, those things should not come up at a trial. One of the things the defense attorneys are going to do is make what we call a motion in limine to say, hey, judge, there's an allegation or there are allegations in civil suits and things of that nature. We want to make a motion to ensure that the jury does not hear this. It would be unfair, it would be prejudicial. There's the danger that if someone's alleging he acted in one way, shape, or form in these civil suits, that he would also act this way in with relation to the federal prosecution. So to ensure the integrity of the federal case, his attorneys are going to move to keep that information out of the ears and eyes of the jury. One of the things that the prosecution may try to do is say, hey, judge, we want to introduce some of these things because they complete the narrative as to why we're here. They complete the fact that, or what we allege is the fact that, he sexually abused individuals. He engaged in these sex orgies and did it with individuals against their will. And these echo our allegations. So they may try to bring that about. I think that the judge should keep those things out because it has nothing to do with the federal prosecution. And if it did, then he would have been charged with those things.
And I got to ask, as a criminal defense attorney at this point, after all of these lawsuits have been, in the press, obviously we're covering it here at Law and Crime, in addition to all the documentaries where we're seeing new allegations. In your opinion, again, as a criminal defense attorney, do you see that Diddy can get a fair trial here in New York?
I don't think he's going to be able to get a fair trial. I think that this case has hit a magnitude of media channels, and everybody knows about Mr. Combs. I mean, you've got to be hiding under a rock to not have some knowledge of what's going on with Mr. Combs. And that's the danger here, is that, everybody has heard about this case. Many people have formulated opinions about this case before even getting into that courtroom to hear the potential facts. And we want to ensure that any juror that sits on this case, that they can be fair, they can be impartial, they can take the facts as they hear them coming through in that courtroom, or how they hear them presented as evidence. Not what we've heard on TV, not what we've heard in the news or anything like that, or any gossip or anything of those sorts of things. So I think it's going to be difficult. There are, of course, people on the flip side who believe and have faith in Mr. Combs, who may also, step into that courtroom, and say, hey, well, I already think he's not guilty. And they're right to do that, because until a person is found guilty, they are not guilty. While they're sitting throughout that entire trial, Mr. Combs is deemed to be not guilty until the jury gets back in that jury room to deliberate and make a finding that he is. But I think the difficulty is going to be getting a fair and impartial jury on this.
Yeah, and it'll be Kind of interesting to see how this all comes about come May. Safa, thank you so much for your insight. I always appreciate it. But, of course, I got to ask you a final question. What is your reaction to the government superseding indictment against Diddy, adding two more victims to that indictment?
It's not a surprise. I think most of us in the legal field, we saw that coming, and also in the media, we saw that coming. I was surprised that we didn't have any new charges per se. I know that two victims were added, which is not a surprise. Again, because a lot of these things echo civilly what has occurred. And that may have come based off of some of the civil lawsuits. The prosecution could have looked at some of those and said, hey, we can use this individual or this victim as a part of our federal prosecution, and we're going to do just that and file that superseding indictment. Again, surprised that there were no new charges, not surprised that there were new victims. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction this case takes. And not only that, what does that mean for trial this coming May? Will that go forward because now we have a superseding indictment? There could be a delay on that.
And that's very near. We're already in February. That trial is supposed to be slated for May, so we'll all see what happens then. Safa, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it.
Thank you.
And of course, Sean Diddy Combs pleaded not guilty to charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. His trial is in just a few short months and expected to begin on May 5th. And while he awaits trial, he remains in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.